Hello, Brian Pearce with the Pearce Brothers, and today we're going to talk a little bit about, this is kind of a follow-up video. A few weeks ago we did a video entitled 500 yards, pistol calibers, how do we say that, Joe? Help me out here.
Yeah, 500 yard lever action pistol caliber.
That's how it's titled. After watching this video, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that again, because this video will make a lot more sense to you at that point. So in a nutshell, what happened, the boys and I were out shooting, and somebody came up with the wild idea of let's shoot lever actions in pistol cartridges only, or revolver, either one, at 500 yards and see what happens. So we had a little still target out there, and we were up on top of the foothills here, and the wind kept blowing. So and Joe wouldn't give us any ciders, if you will. So I kind of guessed. I'm looking at the wind. I'm like, oh boy, because a revolver cartridge out of a rifle, out of this rifle, I didn't chronograph that load specifically out of this rifle, but somewhere around 18 or 1850 is what it was doing. And so it's got a lot of time in flight between the muzzle and 500 yards, and that wind affects that time of flight quite a bit. So I'm kind of judging it. First shot, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold about, a good 10 feet above where I wanted to hold, and about 5 feet to the left, 6 feet, and boom, I was pretty close, but I missed. And I fought the wind throughout the shooting thing. It should have been a lot quicker. It got zeroed on that target, but the wind kept varying. And when I finally connected, I was some of the shots would go behind the target, and you'd see the dust kick up, but you wouldn't know where to adjust your hold. You know, okay, I'm close, but I don't know if I'm just under it, just over it, just to the left of it, and the dust kicks up behind. You didn't know where to hold, so you just had to keep trying until you finally heard it go ding. And I was using a Marlin 1894 Cowboy, one produced by John Marlin. Not that there's anything wrong with subsequent models, just what it is. But what was significant about this gun, it is as it is, came out of the box. It's not even my favorite. I have one that's a favorite. If I would have used that, the boys would have said, Dad, you're cheating. This has a good trigger and all this stuff. This one is just as it came out of the box. I've actually shot it very little. The only thing I've done to it is I put on a Skinner aperture sight. And I love these because you can put a dovetail sight holder in where the sight was, and you can put an extra aperture right in there. It screws, threads right in and out, and you can change the size of your aperture here, threads right in and out. And they're great sight, handsome to boot. They come in a variety of different stainless, blued, or brass, whatever. And then I had an excess white stripe front on the front of this. So other than that, the gun is just as it came out of the box, and I haven't even shot it very much, honestly, but it shoots good enough. And so we're having this competition, and Joe's using a Henry X model in 357, although he's got all the tactical stuff hanging on it. I'm joking. He even has an aperture, or a reflex sight on it. I think he took it off during the competition at some point. Thought he was getting too much parallax. Porter was using a rifle that very similar to this, a Marlin model 1894 carbine. His is an old one, and he shot the devil out of that thing. And the fact is, it probably is due for a new barrel, but it still shoots pretty reasonable. So his has a great trigger, by the way. Mine does not. They all three have a 16-inch barrel twist. So we'll get back to that in a minute. So what was happening? My gun was pretty consistent. It was putting in there. Some I misjudged the wind and be off a little more than I wanted, but the wind we were fighting, finally it calmed down. We made a hit, and that's all the goal was, just make a hit, 500 yards, freestyle, sitting, standing, however you wanted. So we noticed with Joe and Porto that as they were shooting, that 1 minute, boom, be like 20 feet low, and then next minute be 10 feet high and 15 feet right. And I mean, these were bad misses.
That one was just low port and maybe a foot to the right. It was low, probably 2 feet. I have no idea. I didn't see that.
Low. That was way low, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you saw that? Okay.
Yeah.
Way lower and way righter.
Well, I don't know how that's possible. I held higher. Oh, that was even lower. And
Your gun, something's wrong with it, Joe.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not shooting good.
And these were bad misses. Now, these boys have shot since they were little. That was not normal. So, the boys tried to use me as the scapegoat on the ammo. And they're kind of right. Not entirely, but kind of right. So, why was mine shooting much, much better and theirs not? So, it goes back to we were shooting bullets from the same RCBS bullet mold. That's number 38-158-SWC. And it's a 158 grain gas check, although typical of RCBS molds, it's heavy for caliber. In other words, they usually come out more like 165 depending on alloy. So RCBS bullets are generally heavy that way. So here's the two bullets, and we'll get close-ups of these. There's only, let me get you a measurement here. The old one has a 218 thousandths meplat. And the new one, which Joe and Porter were shooting, has a meplat pushing 250 thousandths. It's 248 or something. A little bit hard to count or to measure because you have a little bit of radius on that meplat and that. But other than that, they're both pretty much the same bullet. The length of the nose, the gas check, everything about it, same bullet. But what was happening? So. The new style one, I had a custom caster by the name of Matt's Bullets. He makes excellent cast bullets. Years ago, I needed help casting bullets. I cast bullets, but I don't always have time to cast the volume that I need to. I didn't want to send my personal mold to Matt's Bullets because things can get lost in the mail, whatever, and I've had it for a long time. It's a great mold. So I ordered a brand new one from RCBS, and unbeknownst to me, they had changed the design. So I ordered like, I don't remember, 12, 15,000 of these bullets from him, something like that. And they come back and I look at that, I'm like, oh. And he, of course, returned the mold. And I looked at it, I thought, that's a different mold. I go out and test it. And it's shooting good out to a couple hundred yards of my Colt New Frontier. Beyond that, the accuracy definitely went down. Now, my New Frontier is a really early 1962 version, and it's got a 1 in 14 twist. And so Porter was wanting some bullets, and he said, Dad, I want some of those bullets. I'm like, well, before you buy any of those from me, and I don't know what he bought a couple thousand. I said, you need to load up some, or, I even gave him some ammo. I said, you go shoot these, make sure they're going to stabilize in your gun, because they will not stabilize in all guns. And so he went out and shot them all within a couple hundred yards. In a couple of revolvers he has, a couple of 6 guns, and his lever gun. He's like, yeah, they're great, Dad, they're fine. So he bought a few thousand, I don't remember even how many from me. And then we get up there on the 500-yard thing, and the accuracy falls apart in his gun and in Joe's gun. Now, Joe doesn't hand load, but he had acquired a bunch of ammo from me that was shooting fine in a Smith & Wesson at typical handgun ranges, but when he got that Henry after he'd got the ammo, again, up there on the hill, it was not stabilizing. So what causes this? So years and years ago, there was a guy by the name of Verl Smith of LBT, Lead Bullet Technology. And he was a real icon in the gun industry because up until then, we'd had, in cast bullets, probably the two most popular designs for Magnum revolvers would have been the Elmer Keith style and the Ray Thompson style. The Ray Thompson was very similar to the Keith in meplat size, and again, the meplat is the flat point, and yet he added a couple of grease groove, and he added a gas check. And Elmer Keith's was of course a plain base. They both became very popular. They're both very good bullets, and neither of them have stability issues. It doesn't matter if you go out and shoot them at 700 feet per second, at close range, long range, whatever. They still stabilize. You can stand on them in a revolver where you're going 1,500 feet per second. Stability with both of them is from here to wherever you want to shoot. I mean, 600-800 yards, they're stable. They remain stable. But when Verl Smith of LBT got into it, his concept was he wanted to make bigger meplat, a wide meplat, and he eliminated the front driving band. And they became a real sensation. There was a gun writer by the name of Ross Seyfried that wrote about them and popularized them. He was typically using them in 5-shot custom-built revolvers, Ruger revolvers, and 45 Colt heavyweight bullets pushed to high velocities, 50,000 psi type loads. And he got a remarkable 1-inch group at 100 yards with a scoped up Ruger Bisley testing them. But I still came back to, no, they're destabilizing at long ranges. And I still maintain that because I've experienced it too many times. You can see it in this video in the rifles. And I mentioned this to John Leinbach clear back in the early 80s, mid 80s. I talked to him about this because LBT was making a lot of our custom molds. I had just acquired one from him in the early 80s in 44. It seemed like that mold, it seemed like I had him zeroed in at about 270 grains with alloy, with wheel weight as a base alloy. And I was excited, got that thing and cast it up a bunch. His molds were fabulous. They were lathe bored, so everything was dead center on them. The quality was high. They had a sprue plate spring that held the plate down where you cast it so you didn't get flow up around that on the base of the bullet that varied weights and deformed the bullet a little bit. Anyway, his bullets were phenomenally high quality, but I ran them out and started shooting them. The reason I went to 270 is I was shooting a 4-inch Smith Model 29 a lot in those days, and you couldn't shoot too heavy a bullet because the front sight was not tall enough. So I didn't want to modify my gun very bad, so that's kind of where I cut off the weight limit. But I soon learned if I was going to do long range shooting, the Keith or the Thompson bullet was way better. The LBT WFN, the wide flat nose, would destabilize at longer ranges. And so I learned that if I went to a faster twist barrel and pushed them as hard as I could in a strong Ruger or a Freedom Arms gun, that accuracy would be good at longer distances but not at extreme distances. So I had mentioned this a number of times in print, and a lot of people, boy, it was a real decisive division. People would have said, oh, no, that's not right. And other people said, yeah, I've experienced the same thing. Well, about this time, John Leinbach contacts me, said, Brian, he said, I've got a guy here in Wyoming that has some high-speed photography, and he got photos and images of these bullets destabilizing right in flight. And going back to that original 270 grain 44 bullet, I tested it in 44 Special New Frontier, and Smith & Wesson Model 29 and Marlin Model 1894s. And when I was shooting at 300 yards, I remember shooting and going, boom. And that bullet would be so far off, I'd think, how is it possible for that bullet to be that far off? Because it wasn't even in the realm. It'd be like, you'd look at the different hillsides to see where you're going to hit. It was that bad. And it was obviously, they were not only destabilizing, they were tumbling. So that's like unto a wad cutter. Wad cutter, a full wad cutter bullet, not to be confused with semi-wad cutter, but the full wad cutter, they don't like velocity and they don't like distance. They just don't, that's just not what their design is. So this brings us back to kind of the point I'm trying to make today is that, and this question was raised a number of times by people that watched that video, and I mentioned it in other videos that when we were discussing that video. So how big can a meplat be and still achieve proper stabilization? So I grabbed some commercial bullets, and the reason I did this is that do you ever hear of anybody complain about a Hornady XTP or Spear Gold Dot or a Nosler Sporty Handgun revolver bullet? You ever hear about them destabilizing? No, never. Doesn't happen. So but before we discuss those, I'm primarily focusing on the 357 here. But going way back in time, the original 45 Colt bullet had a meplat at somewhere around 42% of the caliber. So if it was a 452 caliber, that meplat was just a little over 40%. It was a very pointed bullet. That's the bullet that the cavalry used to lay their horses down, hide behind, as though they'd train their soldiers to do this, as though they were being shot at from long distances, and they would shoot at 400 and 500 yards with the 45 Colt and practice hitting a horse or a man or whatever they had to do. So this is the bullet as well that Elmer Keith said was accurate to a half a mile. Obviously, it was stabilizing perfectly fine. I throw that out as just a figure. 42% is what that bullet measures the meplat on that in relation to the caliber. So going to an XTP, the Hornady XTP, a wonderful bullet. I really like the XTPs. They're super accurate. They are reliable at expansion. One thing nobody I've ever heard mention is that with the fully protected point on this, when you're seating them, there's no lead to deform. So you can consistently control that tip, but they also expand at velocity as low as 800 feet per second. Very remarkable bullet. So I just took a 158 grain XTP, and it has a meplat of 227 thousandths. And that's, again, a little bit hard to measure because there's a little bit of rounding, but that's just kind of a number, which is 64% of the caliber. So moving on to the Nosler, the sporting handgun, which is also a great bullet. I could tell you some stories about this bullet from a long time ago, but we'll save that for another day. But it's even smaller yet. It's of course got an exposed lead tip and a hollow point bullet, and they were measuring 195 on this particular lot number. Now that can vary a little bit from lot number to lot number, so it's only 55%. Now again, you never hear of these bullets ever destabilizing. It doesn't happen. The Spear Deep Curl, it was originally introduced as a gold dot. I knew a couple of engineers involved in the design of this bullet way back, and it's a great bullet. Competition is a wonderful thing because it produces these bullets I've discussed so far are all really good. But the Spear, interestingly enough, is the biggest of all, and it measures 262,000, so about 72% of caliber. And Alan Jones, the editor of the Spear number 12, 13, and 14 reloading manuals, is a good friend of mine, and we talked about this. He always liked to call these the flying ashtray because they're so fat and blunt on that end. My testing in these, they're very accurate bullets, they're very good bullets. I love how the gold dot performs, but they are pushing the maximum on the size of the meplat to still achieve reliable stabilization in all guns, barrel twist rates, and so forth and so on. They're pushing the envelope, but they're 72%. So I might make mention of one other here briefly, is that Spear, and I don't know if this is even a current bullet anymore, but back in the day when International Metallic Silhouette was popular, everybody was making silhouette bullets, and they were designed typically with a full metal jacket, but they were designed to give, the utmost in accuracy for, because that was an accuracy game, but they also wanted the weight to reliably topple the heavy steel targets at 200 meters. So the damn rams, as we always called them. So got a little hornet here helping me out. So so this bullet, now this is where it gets really interesting also. It has 172 thousandths meplat, so it's only 48% of caliber. So they from an accuracy standpoint, they made that meplat smaller and smaller. I go back to the old 45 Colt when they were testing that government bullet, and when they were testing it at long range, and the military got some phenomenal accuracy with it, and they just didn't go with the big wide meflats because they wanted the best stabilization possible. They want to stabilize at any distance, and so there are just some interesting numbers. Another one that might be kind of off subject a little bit, because I primarily was focusing on 357s here, was that the 45 auto, here again is a gold dot, and it's let me try to find it. It measures 309 thousandths, and Alan Jones told me, he said we were pushing the envelope on the design of this to get proper stabilization. It's 69%. So there, and now go back to John Linebaugh, when John and I were talking about different designs, and I said, unless somebody's got a really fast twist, they're standing on it hard, or they're dealing with a really long bullet, and I agree with him 100%. This is kind of what he and I discussed and came up with. You start getting above about 72% in meflat size, and you're going to run into stabilization problems. Now, some guys are going to sit here and say, well, I don't shoot a handgun beyond 50 yards. Great, it won't matter, will it? I mean, really, it doesn't matter if you're using a wad cut or whatever. It really doesn't matter then. But this answers the questions what everybody was seeing with Joe and Porter in that 500-yard shoot with their rifles that all had same twist rates and so forth, where their shots were going this way and that way. They're way better shots than that. That was a destabilization of the ammo. So there you kind of have it. Now there's going to be a lot of questions from this video. If there's enough, we'll probably do a follow-up. But I again emphasize that. One thing I was going to make a point of too. The original 44 Keith bullet. There's a lot of variations that I'll do a video on that one of these days. But when Keith designed that clear back in the mid 1920s, he designed that with something around a 270. Never larger than 280, depending on who the maker is. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, so he was about 65%, give or take, depending on molds and that. And I have one of the 2 original molds that were made by that and approved before it ever went into production. So I can do a pretty comprehensive, plus I have virtually every other Keith bullet mold out there made. Now the reason I mention this is there's actually a lot of designs out there from commercial makers that are selling what they call Keith bullets, and you look at them, they're shorter, the meplat is wider, and they don't shoot worth a hoot. So I just throw that out there just because it's of interest to you. So but again, barrel twist rate, caliber, weight, the bullet weight, I kind of stayed middle of the road with the bullets and designs I was talking about here today, but this explains exactly why Joe and Port, you saw such wild shots when they were shooting. They didn't tell me to do this video. I did it because they were like, Dad, what's going on here? And it also drives home the point that if you're gonna testing, it really does matter. It really does. You know, a lot of people kind of the opinion that when you're dealing with straight wall cases in a lever action like what we were, that it doesn't matter from gun to gun. I can tell you, it really does. I was testing 2 Marlins from Remington here a little while back, and 2 Marlins made in the old New Haven plant with the JM stamping, as they're typically called. All 4 were in 45 Colt, and I was testing a variety of ammo. I'm talking probably at least 20 different loads through them, 20 different bullet designs through them. And it was interesting because the 2 Remington guns would shoot this one particular load extremely well. I mean, I was like, man, they shoot really well. The Remington guns had very good barrels on them. I put the same loads in the JM built guns, the New Haven built guns, and they were not shooting well, either one. And so it really and identical loads, same day, everything. It really does matter. Testing really does matter. So we'll do much more detail on those subjects. Joe's going to shut the camera off on me here in a minute. I'm joking. And so anyway, that's a little insight to what happened in that 500-yard lever action pistol cartridge video that we did. You might, if you didn't see it, you might research it, go back and watch it. You'll see some of the wild shots that I was talking about and referencing in there. I've actually seen bullets destabilize much worse than those. If you'll remember too, a couple of weeks prior, Porter was shooting a 155-yard lever gun with that Marlin, and he went, I think it was 10 shots total in that. You know, had to do it quick at different ranges from close out to 155 yards, whatever. He ran right through it and hit them all. And so the bullets are, and that wasn't really a test, but it was indicative that the gun was shooting fine at those distances, but at the 500-yard mark, the bullets lost their stabilization. End of story. So anyway, there you have it. Appreciate you joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe and share. We'd love to have our channel grow. And we will see you next time on the Pearce Brothers.